Good morning, everybody. How are you doing today? How was last night at the Clay and Glass Gallery? Wasn't it awesome? What a great place. And such good host. Did some of you do the tile craft? Put up your hand if you did the tile craft. Look at you, artists. Okay, so welcome to day 2 of the Creative City Summit, the Waterloo Creative City Summit. I'm going to start with our land acknowledgement. I'd like to acknowledge that the work of the Creative City Network of Canada takes place on the traditional territory of many nations, and that the CCNC office is located on the unceded territory of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe peoples. Today, we gather on the land traditionally cared for by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral peoples. We acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous peoples with whom we share this land. To the Indigenous culture workers and artists of this land, we thank you for the work you do in this sector, coast to coast to coast. First Nations, Inuit, and Métis cultures are a vital part of understanding the tapestry of culture across Turtle Island. So I want to start by saying hello, virtual people, as well. Yesterday we had a little bit of a stumble at the end of our virtual roundtable on public art. So if you have an interest and you're in the virtual land or even in the in-person land, to open up that discussion again, please send a message to us and we'll see what we can do about extending some time to talk more about the project in Ottawa, the environmental project in Ottawa. I have some announcements. Okay, I know you've all downloaded the app now, so I'm not going to say that again. In terms of dietary, there are some people in the room who have dietary considerations. We have a new process for today because yesterday was another stumble. So please see Conrad. Where's Conrad? Stand up, Conrad. If you have dietary, please see Conrad just before lunch, and he's going to kind of sort everything out. He's going to be like your expediter in terms of your lunch, okay? I wanted to mention too, I didn't mention this yesterday, but I think it's important for you all to know that if you need a sort of a place to go to have a nice chat or to just decompress, the visitor center is open every day for us. And that's just the train station just over there. I think it's over there. Yeah, it's over there. And it's lovely. The staff there are amazing. And so, yeah, please go over there if you just need a quiet place to be. I wanted to also mention that the lost and found, if you've lost something and you need to find it, is downstairs at the registration table. So go and check there. And with that, I will ask our wonderful tech staff to bring up our Waterloo video. Thanks very much. I'm just going to stay here. 1, 2, 1, 2. We are All right, lovely video, and I think we've already kind of experienced some of that in our day yesterday. Next up, we have our video greetings from the MPP for the area.
As the Member of Provincial Parliament for the riding of Waterloo, I am thrilled to welcome you to our great city for the 2022 Creative City Summit. It's exciting to see the safe return of the summit, and I welcome those who are with us in person in Waterloo, as well as those who are joining us virtually. This summit provides an excellent opportunity to connect and collaborate with the collective goal of building vital infrastructure for arts and cultural development across Canada. Arts and cultural organizations are such an important part of the fabric of our communities, which has become especially apparent over the course of the pandemic. Events like this one provide a vital opportunity to connect and be inspired by the energy of like-minded people, which can be so powerful. I also want to recognize that this is the 20th anniversary of the Creative City Network of Canada, so congratulations to everyone involved. Thank you for your participation in this summit and for your creativity, your hope, your optimism, your passion for innovation and creativity is inspiring and much needed, and I wish you all a wonderful weekend.
Okay, I didn't bring my phone up, but are we around 9:15 now? 9:08. We can take a couple of minutes, but we're going to move into our regularly scheduled programming right away, which this time is not the discussion rooms, but the PDPs. So you will be breaking out into the breakout rooms. For those of you who are here in person and in the virtual land, the peer-to-peer session that's available in this room, the Silver Lake Ballroom, is Leading the Way, Mapping Local Culture from North Van Arts. And so if you're watching virtually, you can do that. You can also get that P2P, like I said yesterday, online afterwards. So if you have an interest in this one, but you want to go to another one and you're in person, then you can choose some of these other ones. So the second session is Burning Questions: How the Culture Statistics Strategy Program Supports Municipal Culture Planning and Policy Making in Canada. And that is in Grand River A with Megan Papadinets from the city of Mississauga. And then in Grand River B, the third peer-to-peer session is UNESCO and London Say What, the City of London. And this is an important one for you to go and see if your municipality is interested in becoming a UNESCO Creative City Network member. So UNESCO has a worldwide membership of cities, and we in Canada have, I believe, 4 cities that are members now: Montreal, Toronto, Quebec City, and now London. There are different categories under which you can become a creative city, and those creative cities meet annually and discuss the sustainable development goals and that kind of thing. So CCNC has a partnership with CC UNESCO, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later today. And we work with you to help you make a good application. So they are interested in new applications from Canadian cities. If you're interested in that, come and see me, and we'll talk more. We do have other UNESCO things going on throughout the day today, CC UNESCO things going on throughout the day today. Okay, so that's in Grand River B if you want to find out how London went through their process. And then how can we enhance community vibrancy? And that's the Conseil Communautaire Notre-Dame-de-Grâce, and that is in Laurel Creek. So you've got about maybe 5 minutes before we start those panels this morning. And Kate, did you have something? No. Thumbs up, 5 minutes. All right. Thanks very much, everybody. Enjoy your day.
Good morning. Hello, it's just past 9:15, so I think we should probably get started. If everybody's ready. Okay, so here we are. Good morning, everyone. My name is Michelle Richard with North Van Arts in British Columbia, and I'm the manager for the North Shore Culture Compass.
And my name is Harriet Goodwin. Very happy to be here representing one of my clients, the North Shore Culture Compass, and my role is Marketing and Outreach Manager.
So we're going to start off because what we're talking about here today, it's all about place. It's all about connecting to place and the people. So we want to recognize and acknowledge that the people who have stewarded the land that we're on right now since time immemorial are the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Neutral peoples. The project that we're going to be talking about today happens on what we call today Vancouver's North Shore. The way this presentation is going to work, it's a story map. So we're going to scroll down. So the project is led by North Van Arts. The geographic scope of this project happens on what we call today and what's been there since about between 1906 and 1911. Three municipalities, the City of North Vancouver, the District of North Vancouver, and the District of West Vancouver were established on the lands that have been stewarded and inhabited since time immemorial by the Squamish, the Squamish Nation, and the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. So that's our geographic scope, what we're going to talk about today. We're going to get started with a short video that introduces you to what is the North Shore Culture Compass.
Welcome to the North Shore Culture Compass, a free online map of the North Shore's arts and culture, right at your fingertips. Start your journey by exploring the map's many exciting categories, including public art, First Nations, and so much more. Listings from your selected category of interest will appear on the map and in alphabetical order on the right. Type keywords into the search bar in the left corner to find specific results, or zoom into the map, pan, and click on the arrows to explore what's on the map. Every listing contains a wealth of information just waiting to be discovered, as well as directions to visit the location. Ready to navigate to new experiences? Start your North Shore Culture Compass journey today on mobile, tablet, or desktop.
So there you go. So that's a bit of an overview. And just a note, so we have this story map presentation that we're sharing with you today. We will be sharing with you a link so that you can browse through a different version of the story map at your leisure, on your own time, with kind of what we're saying today incorporated into it. So the true story version. So you will be able to explore the story map on your own after. So we thought we'd start, even though a lot of you are probably very familiar with cultural mapping, we thought we'd start with a quote from the UNESCO Cultural Mapping Workshop that was in Bangkok in 2004, because this is kind of encapsulates a bit of what we're thinking about cultural mapping and the project that we've been working on. So I'm going to take the time to read it out. Cultural mapping involves a community identifying and documenting local cultural resources. Through this research, cultural elements are recorded. The tangibles like galleries, craft industries, distinctive landmarks, local events and industries, as well as the intangibles like memories, personal histories, attitudes, and values. Those are a lot of the guiding ideas that we've been following ever since we started on this. The objectives that we have set out to achieve are to have a free, interactive culture map. We want this to become a digital and marketing hub for the community. One of the big goals is to increase visibility for North Shore arts, culture, and heritage organizations. We want to elevate arts and culture across the North Shore. And while we do that, we hope to build audience and awareness of arts and culture for everyone. We want to promote local culture to residents and visitors. And we also want to encourage partnerships and collaboration within and beyond the cultural sector. And so far, as you'll see as we go through this presentation, it's been working. So we're starting with this little backgrounder, and then we'll get into the real, I think, focus of the presentation today is we started with a culture map, and then what? All of the things that we have been able to do with it, and the ideas that we've got moving forward. We started the process, and any of you who've ever done a culture map, you'll know how long it takes. We started way back in 2015, and that's when we started doing the research and development. And so there might be people here in this room or at this conference who I contacted back in 2015, 2016, and asked if you have a culture map, how did you go about doing it? And if you had to do it again, what would you do differently? And in that, we learned from a lot of people. And we really appreciated that. So if anyone's here who I called, I say thank you. It really helped us out. And that's why we're here today too, is because we want to help out those coming after us, or those who might be thinking about updating their map. We're here to share what we've learned as well. And in that time, we built lots of relationships. The second phase is when we actually secured some funding, thank you Canadian Heritage, because that meant that we could get going on this. So once we secured the funding, then we started actually producing the map and thinking about marketing, which we learned was very important. Because if no one knows about it, what's the point? The third phase that we're in now started after we launched. We launched the North Shore Culture Compass on March 12th, 2020. Yes, the day before the world shut down. Luckily, it's a digital tool, so that was helpful. We still kept working on it, but it was a bit of an uphill struggle because nobody knew about it, and then the world shut down. So we had to try to get the word out among other information circulating at the time. So since that time, we have been working on maintenance and marketing. We have been working on education and outreach as well. Doing enhancements, and this is one of the, well, there are so many fun things, but we keep learning new things that we can do with this map, and that's where the enhancements just keep coming in. And knowledge sharing. Why we're here today is to help share what we've learned and help anyone out if we can, so that we can continue learning from each other. One of the earliest things that we did was decide which platform we were going to use. And if anyone's built a culture map, you know that the choice is vast and varied. We landed on Esri's ArcGIS for a number of reasons. One of the big ones is because it complements existing systems already on the North Shore. So interoperability was a big one for us. All municipalities and nations on the North Shore already used ArcGIS. So it allows for data sharing, which is handy if we want to provide someone, for example, their public art data, so that the District of West Vancouver, for example, now uses data that we supplied to them so that they can plan their public art maintenance program. We can use, and you'll see a little bit later, advanced data management and analysis, another really fun thing that we can do with ArcGIS. It's quite user-friendly and easy to maintain, so even folks like us, arts administrators with backgrounds in history and art history, can maintain and use Esri's ArcGIS. And fun tools like this story map are available through this platform as well. Esri provides excellent service and support. They're always there for us, even though we're not GIS experts. And the base map information is updated regularly. So the base map that you will see, because we've put it throughout this presentation, is we've chosen it, we've customized it, but the information on it, so the street names, all of that comes from the municipalities that they feed to Esri, and then we just have it. So it's up to date. And if it's not up to date, it's not us. It hopefully will be up to date. Just because some people might be wondering what the budget for this kind of project is, we put this information in to go over quickly. And again, once you receive the link after, you can look at the numbers in more detail. But basically, the project development phase, which was the first 3-year phase of the project before we launched it, big thanks to Metro Vancouver, the regional funding of $10,000, and the North Shore municipalities all pitched in $5,000 each. That helped us go to Canadian Heritage the Strategic Initiatives Program, and they funded with $420,000, which meant we could get going. So we were very happy about that. So we continued. That full budget for that 3-year development phase was about $758,000. The phase we're in now, as I mentioned before, is post-launch. So we're in maintenance and enhancements. And for that, we're very thankful to the Canada Council Digital Strategy Fund, which has funded for $495,000 over a 3-year period. So that's the funding that we're working with now. And again, you can look at that in more detail, but you can see that big blue pie. That's the Canada Council funding. So very helpful that the federal government has been so supportive of this. I think they see the potential, and I think they want us to do this and help share what we've learned so that we can help anyone if they're interested in doing the same thing. And that's just the expenses for the maintenance and enhancements phase that we're in now. I'm going to pass over to Harriet to talk about community collaboration.
Okay, thank you. So early on, we decided that in order to put together a culture map, we needed to define what we thought of as culture. So we defined culture as the manifestation of shared values, arts, beliefs, aesthetics, and identity. We recognize culture as an expression of how people relate to nature, the physical environment, and to place. We define art as the expression or application of human creative skill and imagination. Okay, and next we decided we really needed an advisory committee. So we wanted to have a room full of people that represented arts and culture, heritage, education, business, tourism, the municipalities that Michelle mentioned, the First Nations, and also libraries to inform the conception and development of this map. So here you can see all the organizations that wanted to be on the advisory committee. So in total, we had 29. And then actually within those organizations, we had sometimes 1, 2, 3 people who wanted to take part. So we actually had 45 people, so we couldn't fit them in a room after all, but we were very happy to have all the voices there at the table, so to speak. So here's all of the organizations, some of which I am sure are at this conference today.
When did you compile the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee? In 2015 or?
We started making phone calls in 2015. 2015, 2016, we probably met for the first time.
No problem. So then we wanted to figure out the best way to organize all of the listings that were going to appear on the culture map. So we created 10 categories, and some of the listings that we had actually do appear in more than one category. They just can't be defined. So by just one. And then we used color-coded categories with matching icons and waypoints on the map. Also, as you go onto the North Shore Culture Campus, you'll see that all categories is the landing page, so that includes all of the assets that we feature. And just a quick shout out, the First Nations icon was created by a local Tsleil-Waututh artist called Ocean Highland. Okay, so here we are going to go through the categories that we decided on. As Michelle mentioned, we'll be sending this out, so you can read them in more detail in your own time. But as an overview, we have, first of all, creative and cultural industries, cultural and natural heritage, we have cultural organizations, cultural spaces and facilities, festivals and events, First Nations, there's that icon that I mentioned, intangibles and stories, public art. And you can see how the wayfinders change color to match the icon there. public institutions. Now the map's updating for me. Thank you. Service organizations. Oh, and service organizations. So this map is really for the community and also by the community. So we follow a participatory cultural mapping model. So another UNESCO quote here: cultural mapping involves the community identifying and documenting local cultural resources. So the listings are added and updated regularly, creating a dynamic and ever-evolving hub. So members of the community can actually submit listings themselves. We do have set criteria for those listings, so we will then kind of go through them and check that they match the criteria, and then we will publish them to the map. And then, of course, sometimes these listings no longer exist anymore, you know, especially during COVID, we had, unfortunately, a lot of losses of important organizations. And all of these go into a database, so we have a really valuable record of those more intangible listings there. So to give you an idea, you saw that there was a festivals and events category. So we've had 300 events listed in year 1 by 84 organizations. And then by year 2, we had almost 600 by 130 organizations. And we just wanted to give you kind of an overview of the kind of people that are listing their events on the North Shore Culture Campus. So we've divided them into 3 sections here. We have the service organizations and public institutions. We have the arts-based cultural organizations. So these are all photos taken from these individual events that were listed on the North Shore at some point. And then we have the cultural and natural heritage organizations. And yeah, you can actually click, as I mentioned before, you can click on, in your own time, what these photos actually represent and what were the events that were actually listed. Okay, I'm going to hand back to Michelle for features and functionality section.
So we have all of these wonderful listings, and we call them listings. That was a decision also with the advisory committee. We were calling them assets, but when we talked to the advisory committee and they talked about users and the general public, and they said, you know what, if you call them assets, no one's going to be interested. So we might flip back and forth. But what we're supposed to be saying for public facing is listings, because that is apparently more general public consumption. So we have all of these wonderful assets listed. Now we need some features and functionality to make them accessible and a little bit dynamic. So in all 10 categories, we have some basic functionality. Each point, when you click on the waypoint, when Harriet was scrolling through and you saw those colored waypoints, whenever you click on each of those waypoints, you will get an image, a description, 1,000 characters, the physical address, an online link, whatever that organization provides, and we also put in a link to the public transit trip planner to make people broad access information for them to get there. So all of this information, as Harriet said, it's for the community, by the community, is submitted by the organization. So they control the message, they control the image that they're providing. And then we, as she said, we proof it and we put it up if it meets the criteria. We do have some special categories that have additional functionality. And again, these were all decided upon and developed with the advisory committee. The first one is festivals and events is the first special category that we have. Except that's not the map. But the way that this category works is that we wanted a way so that we had both annual events on the Culture Compass at all times, so that if you're looking at the Culture Compass in February, you're planning a trip to the North Shore, or you're planning on having visitors to the North Shore in the summer, you can take a look at the Culture Compass and see what usually happens in the region in the summer. So we wanted those annual recurring events to always have a presence. So they do. But we also have current events. And this was what the advisory committee said it's really important to get people coming back to the map. is to have this category that can be a little bit dynamic so that organizations can not only list those annual events that are recurring and always happening, but those one-off events that they're doing or the current edition of an annual event. For example, we have the Arts in the Garden just happens to be an event that North Van Arts puts on and has put on since 1999. So it's an annual occurring event, has happened for 20 years. Even through the pandemic, it just went online. But it's always been happening the last weekend of May. So the listing that we've submitted is that Arts in the Garden happens the last weekend of May. Hold the date, and that's always on the Culture Compass. Once we have the promotional materials available for that year, we upload an event listing for the current event that tells you what the specific dates are. So in 2022, that event was held for the first time in person in 2 years, May 28th and 29th, 2022. So there, if you went during that time, you would have had 2 listings on the Culture Compass that explain the event. If you go on the Culture Compass today, this current event is not there because it comes off after the event end date. So that's a way that we try to have that category a little bit more dynamic. So we have filters on that category as well. You can find an event by event type. So for example, Culture Days. We have a Culture Days event type so that if someone on the North Shore is putting on an event that's first, we make sure that they register it with Culture Days because we want to make sure that that's happening as well. And then they list on the Culture Compass so that it can be discoverable. You can search by date. If you know that you've got someone visiting on a certain day, you want to find something to do, put in the date. Age range, the age category that the target audience is intended, if the event is free or paid, or you can search for it by name. Another way to always search on the map is to zoom into a geographic area. You know where you live, or you're going to visit a friend's house, you want to go out for a walk and find something that's going around, you zoom to that geographic area, see what's going on around you, that you can walk to, bike to. The other special category that we have is the First Nations category, which is the map on the right. So we'll see if it catches up. This category has been developed with the First Nations. We've been working with First Nations, the staff at the Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh Nation, the community members, and they've just been wonderful to work with. We've been received by the council a number of times, and it was at their suggestion that we have a category called First Nations. They suggested what the icon would be, and we then commissioned an artist to create that icon for us. So the category, when you arrive on that category, it starts with a special splash screen that acknowledges the land, that acknowledges the work that we've done together and that we continue to do together to populate this category, and that we are open to any comments, something that might be on the map that shouldn't be, that should be different, or something that's missing. Always open, the conversations are always happening. So one of the beauties of this tool is that we can update quite easily if need be. One of the really fun things in this category is the slider tool. And you can see in this, I wonder if this, it's there. So here, I mean, we have you can see the little animation on the left. But what we can do here is I can show you how this slider tool works. So this is the First Nations category. I clicked away the acknowledgement, but it's always there. So if you clicked away and you want to get back to see what it says, you can always find it. And here's the slider tool that we have. So this little tool allows us to show the land. I'm just going to zoom in so we can see it better. With all of those settler parks, streets, place names that we've added since 1906, late 19th century maybe. But if you would like to see what the land has looked like, you can swipe it away. When we showed this to the Squamish Nation staff, they were quite like that because it provides a visual of what the land has always been like. What we weren't able to erase are the way that the waterfront has been changed. But we now see clearly the place names, and these place names are in Squamish at the moment. If you want to get context of where that is with the settler place names, you can just swipe them back on. So that's one fun feature of the First Nations category. Another fun feature is that we have, you may have noticed, these paw prints. that are throughout the category. And it was when we were doing the recordings for the place names that our Squamish Nation consultant Rebecca Duncan and her daughter suggested that they were telling us how important the animals, the insects, the birds, the supernatural beings are to their relationship with the place, and how we're one of those animals and beings that inhabit the place. So it was really important to them that we include animals on the map. So we did. And we represent those with paw prints different than the waypoints in the other categories. So once we had the names for the animals, we have the stories. For each one, there's a story or meaning and a legend. We have the name. At the moment, we have them in Squamish or Squamish, and we will be adding them soon in the Tsleil-Waututh traditional language. We have the information. We needed an image, so we worked with our cultural consultant, Rebecca Duncan again, who suggested that we have images that show both the realistic animal or being as well as in Coast Salish design to show what their traditional design is. So we commissioned an artist, Olivia George, who's a Tsleil-Waututh artist, and she has created, I think she has now created 36 of these animals for us. That are throughout the map. So that is another fun thing we have. I'm just going to keep scrolling because I think I can click on this and you can hear, because we can see what the name is, but sometimes we can't pronounce it unless we listen.
So quick. So quick.
So we can practice and we can hear, even just hearing the language often will give us some visuals, and we experience a bit more of their culture by listening to the language. So we have those for animals. We have the place names in Squamish. We currently have 18 place names in Squamish and in Squamish, and we are working with the Tsleil-Waututh Nation to have names as well in their traditional language, which is Downriver Henkaminam. So and here's a place name.
Sla'an.
Slahan.
Sla'an.
So we're also learning about how they've always called these places, because they still do refer to these places. Eslahan is something, actually, it's becoming more and more known on the North Shore now. You can say, I'm going to Eslahan, and a lot of people will know where you're going. So it's something that we're very honored that they are trusting us with this language, and we're very much looking forward to continue working with them to continue adding to that. Back to Harriet for enhancements and activations.
I've got one. Thank you. Enhancements and activations. So we really wanted, now that the map was created, we wanted to create some novel ways to engage the public with the map. So the first initiative I'm going to talk about is the Mapped exhibition that we curated. Just to backtrack slightly, the North Shore Culture Compass is a project by North Van Arts. And North Van Arts operates out of Cityscape Community Art Space on the North Shore. So we had this exhibition available for people to come and experience, to learn about the different categories. We had the map up there and available for people to use and engage with. And we are hoping to kind of package that up and have it as a traveling exhibit throughout the North Shore region. Yes, and as Michelle mentioned, we launched at March 2020. So we had all of these outreach events planned in person that obviously we couldn't do. So we kind of went back to the drawing board and we thought, how can we engage the public in a really safe way, preferably outdoors? And so the treasure hunts were created. And the treasure hunts, there are 12 now, actually, and they each have several clues. You have to go out into your neighborhood and find these letters at different locations. You can see the map there in the top right. So you have to actually be there and find the letters, and then you can unscramble those letters to find a code word. Many of the clues are actually available to find on the map itself, so it's a mix, it's kind of a hybrid of in-person and online. And we often would kind of launch these treasure hunts. You can see this one was from July to September in 2021, in correspondence with a prize package that you could win, which was a great incentive for people to go out and do them. So in total, we have so far 12 treasure hunts. We've actually engaged about 100 different cultural organizations on the North Shore that are featured in these treasure hunts. And with the help of marketing and some press, we've actually had over 1,000 participants. So it was a very popular activity to do, especially during the pandemic. So here are some testimonials from people who have done some of the treasure hunts. And what was really cool is that a lot of these people who had lived in these neighborhoods for forever, for 40 years, and they hadn't realized the cultural treasures that were just on their doorstep, and they didn't know about specific buildings or place names and things like that. So that was very rewarding for them. And here you can find some pictures of people doing the treasure hunts and the different clues that we had out in different neighborhoods. Oh, and speaking of prizes, we also ran contests such as Altogether Inclusive. We ran for BC Heritage Week in 2022. We ran the Telling Traditions contest, where we invited members of the community to share their traditions as expressions of cultural identity. So these were traditions that took place at home, mostly on the North Shore or in the community, but they originated from all over the world. So you can see a visual of that. And we had a day out on the North Shore that was sponsored by Vancouver's North Shore Tourism, who's a great partner of ours. And in the past, they've donated, hotel stays. And so those are some great incentives for these treasure hunts and the contest as well. There's some swag that we were giving away as part of the prize and that day out on the North Shore. Okay, and another initiative that we have been doing since 2017 is actually a fundraiser of ours. So the North Shore Culture Compass creates this You Are Here wall calendar, and it's full of 12 different images of local North Shore scenes by 12 local artists. And we actually have the 2023 calendar that's just been printed. We have a little merch table at the front here, so please come and check it out after the presentation. Okay, another enhancement that we made to the map more recently was trails. And for anyone who's visited the North Shore of Vancouver or has heard about it, you probably know that it's a hot spot for hiking. So we thought, what better way to kind of showcase the cultural identity and the sense of place on the North Shore than by adding, we added 21 trails in 2021. So these trails can be, you can see them, they're the dashed green line that appears in cultural and natural heritage category. So this is just an example of one of the trails that we featured and the kinds of cultural stops on the way that you can make on that trail. And we only added what we deem to be cultural trails, and you might be thinking, what is a cultural trail? We have deemed it as being significant in some ways, such as perhaps there's some clues of past industry that had happened in that area along the way, or perhaps there's an interesting name that is tied to like a historical anecdote or something like that. But yeah, they're all 21 on there, all of cultural significance. Okay, I'll hand back to Michelle for programs.
Thank you. So now we have these wonderful listings and assets. We have all of these enhancements and engagement opportunities. Why not launch some programs to help people guide them in navigating what's on the Culture Compass and how they can use what's there to learn more about the place that they live or work or play. So one of the programs that we launched in the past year was the Navigators Education Program. It uses the North Shore Culture Compass to connect educators and teachers to ideas and resources to engage the students in learning about local culture, heritage, history, geography, and diversity of Vancouver's North Shore. Something I found as I watched my kids go through school is they're often learning lessons from elsewhere in Canada or elsewhere in the world, when there are examples right locally that they could be using and learning about where they live, applying the concepts within the educational curriculum. So that's kind of why we wanted to do this, is because it just seems like people know always what's going on all over the world, but do they know what's going on in their own community? So that's what we were trying to do with this. We currently have two streams. Well, we have two streams. The first stream is the free downloadable guide that has the activities, resources and ideas aimed at secondary level, and it's curriculum based. The second stream is what we're launching in January 2023. And this is an after-school art program, so it's more for elementary level, and it is place-based visual art. So there are 12 visual art activities inspired by public art that is located on the North Shore, and of course, listed on the North Shore Culture Compass. So this, I'm just gonna flip through, I won't flip through all 41 pages, but this just gives you an idea of what's in the guide that we've prepared that is available for free download online as a PDF. We've got the activities. It's all about place-based learning. Yes, we show off our buttons because we also encourage educators, if they want to do treasure hunts as part of the activities, they can run contests with their classes and they can provide some prizes if they want as well. We've got 13 activities at the moment, but a lot of those educators can be inspired and create their own. The 4 points theme that we've used throughout the guide is all about people, places, stories, and time. So that's what we've tried to carry through. And then you can see there are a variety of activities. What we also have been doing, and we're getting so close to printing, are flashcards. And this was another idea of Rebecca Duncan, who has just been absolutely wonderful to work with. She is from the Squamish Nation and is a language teacher. So as she was working, she was the one who suggested that we have the animals and told us about how important the animals are in the Indigenous culture. And she said, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful, once she saw the images that had been created by Olivia George, she said, wouldn't it be wonderful to have these as flashcards that I could use in my language learning? Well, we'll see what other event is there. I think we may have internet connection. Did we really? Well, we know that the North Shore Black Bear Society also recently listed on the map. I'm going to suspect that was in the cultural and natural heritage category as well as the service organizations. So we can also see at a glance the assets by municipality and nation, so what that distribution is. We can see that we currently have 67 active current events, and we're at 669 total cultural assets. We can also flip through, but I won't, we can flip through the different categories to see how many listings are in each category. So we can do that all at a glance. Well, it says it was updated 3 minutes ago, so I think we had internet 3 minutes ago. What else can we do? We can map cultural activity. Of course, we have a map. So this is a heat map. So this is showing us the current festivals and events that were listed in 2021, looking at where the locations were, where the event was on the map, showing the cultural hotspots. Now again, this is not showing all of the events that happened, this is showing all of the events that were listed on the Culture Compass, and we're well aware of that. But we can see from this, either where there might be a lack of cultural activity, some potential opportunities, or where we need to reach out a little bit more to organizations that might not be engaging with the Culture Compass yet. So we've still got work to do. So heat maps, more fun. And then the fun continues. So we launched another program that's called Data Insights. And this is where we're learning about some of the wonderful things that we can do with Esri's ArcGIS. We are trying to use this Data Insights program to help strengthen the cultural sector on the North Shore by providing demographic information about who lives in the community, where they reside, and how they engage with local cultural activities. We can visually map out our audience. And when you combine something like that with open source data such as the census and Environics data is also available through Esri's ArcGIS, we get a wealth of information. So we've started this by preparing some community snapshots. Our mandate is to serve our community, but we need to know who that community is in order to be able to serve them. So we're trying to better understand our community, to be able to plan programming, identify opportunities, reach new audiences, diverse communities, and newcomers. So we're making data-driven decisions. We can also update this data with the latest census information. We're waiting, I think there's another release from Census Canada on October 26th. So we're waiting for all of that information from the 2021 census to come out. What we've done so far is, this, for example, is a map. We mapped the audience for all of North Van Art's programs over 2020-2021. Fortunately, because a lot of programming was online, we were asking for things like postal codes. We didn't really do that before. So we're learning all the time. Now we know that we need to ask for postal codes, which allows us to map our audience. So if you can see that dark red line there, that's where North Van Art's offices are located and Cityscape Community Art Space. So that's good news, is that we look to be engaging those people who live around our space. So that's one of the things we can do. We can also map by programs. So annually we do an anonymous art show. This map shows in one color we have the artists who participated. We have about 300 artists participating in that show. It's small work. And we have a lot of buyers as well. So we've mapped the artists in one color and the buyers or the bidders in another color, so we can see where those people are geographically. And then we take that information, once we know who our audience is, by asking them what their postal code is, we can take that census data and that Environics data and make some assumptions, but try to understand who they are based on what census data says those people who live in that area are or do, or what language they might speak. So we're overlaying this data to try to get a better understanding of our community so that we can better serve our community. Back to Harriet.
Thank you. So between all the outreach that we're doing to kind of get organizations and other cultural assets or listings on the map, and the enhancements that we're doing, and these additional initiatives to engage the public, do they have music? We don't have music. You guys are still having fun, right? We have all these initiatives and projects that we're doing, as we've discussed so far in the presentation, and we need to market it, as Michelle said. We need people to be using the map, and our goal is for it to be a very dynamic and ever-evolving tool. So we've been working with various... That is not what I'm doing. We have been working to spread the word about the Culture Compass, both online, and this summer we were working at outreach events across the North Shore. So we went to 8 in total, where we were engaging with Culture Compass demos and doing art activities that were relevant to perhaps the festival or the location of the festival, to really get people used to using and adding to the map. And we're able to see that we have a really great kind of even split of age groups that we're attracting to the map. So that's very exciting for us. Okay, that was fast. Back to Michelle.
So this area is really important because we wouldn't have been able to do all of this without our wonderful partners, funders, and supporters. So I'm gonna scroll through kind of quickly, because some of them we talked about, because we can't talk about the North Shore Culture Compass without talking about our funders, partners, and supporters. The Coho Festival and the Coho Society was lots of fun. We created for them treasure hunts specifically about Coho. We also created a story map for them that shows their interpretive walks. They have 4 interpretive zones across the North Shore that talk about their efforts to maintain the Coho salmon population. We're also working a lot with Minova, the Museum of North Vancouver. We're working on a story map for them that is a bit of a then and now, the shipyards retracing the history of Lower Lonsdale. That will coincide with an upcoming exhibition at the museum, so this will be a digital component to that. We work so much with the North Vancouver Recreation and Culture Commission. They have been a supporter right from the get-go, and they are wonderful to work with. They also do our grants and funding, our arts and culture funding, and they encourage everybody who receives funding from them to list on the Culture Compass. So wonderful partners to work with. The Squamish Nation has been great. Like since the get-go, we've been working with them since 2015, 2016, and they have been so generous and so supportive with, as I mentioned, the place names, the animals, and we just continue to look forward to working with them, as well as the Tsleil-Waututh Nation, people of the Inlet. Much smaller population than the Squamish Nation, but equally vibrant, dynamic. They have been stewarding the land since time out of mind, and they continue to do a wonderful job, and we're so thrilled to be working with them. And Vancouver's North Shore, as Harriet mentioned, they are a wonderful partner. They have been very supportive, providing prizes. One of the big audiences for the Culture Compass is tourists. So it's a natural partnership for us, and they get great prizes to provide incentives to participate. The West Vancouver Community Arts Council, our equivalent, I guess, in West Vancouver, our legal name is the North Vancouver Community Arts Council. So the West Vancouver Community Arts Council has been an absolutely wonderful partner, again, since the get-go. Super helpful on the advisory committee. We do an exhibition of the artwork in the You Are Here calendar every year. We do one in North Vancouver, one in West Vancouver, and they have hosted the exhibition annually, as well as some summer positions even for the Culture Compass to make sure that we have that geographic distribution across the region. And of course, the funders, Canadian Heritage Canada Council, and you can see here all of the wonderful funders and supporters that we have who've made it all possible. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much. Okay, so this is a quick, I know that we only have about 10 minutes, just short, for questions. Before we do that, this is just a quick snapshot. So this was a little Instagram celebratory post that we put together celebrating our 2nd birthday. That was in March. So by March, we had 625 total cultural assets. The most populated category was the public art category. We had a very dynamic category with 44 new events being listed each month on average. We have, and in terms of festivals events, we do really want it to be the go-to place to find interesting cultural events on the North Shore. And finally, the cultural and natural heritage had a reach of over 2,000 views. So just to give you a little overview there. I do encourage you to follow us on both Instagram and on Facebook. There's our handle here, and to, of course, visit the actual online map. And before we take questions, just a reminder that here on our merch table, we do have treasure hunts, we have buttons, we have rack cards, so please do come up after and chat to us. But for now, is there any questions from the audience?
For the events or features submitted by other organizations or that, how does the policing go? You said you approve it, but obviously they can't just submit and then forget about it. You're going to want them to keep it current and updated. How is that policing done?
And that's part of the beauty of this. One of the things that we said at the outset is that we wanted to encourage collaboration and partnerships and build relationships. And we're discovering assets across the North Shore that we didn't know existed. So it's that engagement that's also really important. So two things, I guess. So an asset may have listed in 2020. So you're right, we want to make sure they keep that up to date. We've been fortunate to have summer positions through Canada Summer Jobs, and usually that cultural mapping assistant helps us go through the categories and kind of proof them, make sure everything is still up to date, and do some outreach. We also send a quarterly update to all of the assets listed, just to kind of remind them that they're on the map, because sometimes we forget where we've listed. So they're reminded of that, yes, they're on the map, and this is what we're doing. So if they know that they've changed a branding or whatever, then they're reminded that they're there, and maybe they want to update that. But so we have kind of both checks, I guess. And then for the events, when they're submitting the current events, whenever they're submitting anything, we have 2 forms. So they're listing forms that also come with the Esri platform. That's kind of a survey. So you can submit an asset or you can submit a current event. So our staff receives that. We look through it. Sometimes we have to resize the image, make sure it fits, check the link, make sure it's good, and then we put it on the map. So there is that check.
I think we have time for both.
For any listing, the more permanent assets are the easiest ones to get on the map, but of course events, because they're time sensitive and you want them in a timely fashion, that's where the challenge is. Have you considered establishing a means of accepting like feeds from external listings to be dumped into your
We did, actually. That was the first thing that we wanted to do, was there's a North Shore News is our community newspaper, because our challenge is to have something that's North Shore wide, which is kind of why we're doing the map, because municipalities have their boundaries. Nations will work for their members, but we are in arts and culture, we work together, we're collaborative. So we worked with the North Shore News, and we had a feed going before we launched the map, and it was working. We were populating our events calendar. It was wonderful. It was going to be beautiful. And then they changed their events calendar, and it wasn't going to work. So we had to do a really quick pivot and build our own. Because of that experience that we went through, I think probably 4 months of preparing it and making it work and making it happen, and paying all of the staff who were doing that, all of the technical staff, and they switched it, and there was nothing we could do about it. We thought, well, we're going to take back that control and do it ourselves. So that's how we tried. We would have loved to, because you're right, it takes a lot of time. Because now we have staff who are listing 44 events every month. But it's also valuable because we know what's going on, and we're engaging with these organizations that are listing. So there's the pro side of it, I guess.
Then we had a question over here, I think.
Yeah, I was just curious about buy-in in the sense, so in our municipality, there's like 5 or 6 calendars. People have to update every calendar. We try to encourage, so Simcoe County did a similar project for this for us on our behalf. But we hear things like, I don't have time to do it. And then we just can't seem to get buy-in on one calendar. It's like if we all just subscribe to one calendar. And I know sometimes we serve different, you know, or featuring different things like ECDEB or whatever. But there's filterable options, and I'm just curious how much buy-in you've gotten with all these municipalities and your tourism operator, DMOs, you know, in terms of, you know, supporting this map as the map.
Well, here's the challenge. One of the challenges there is that this is a culture map. And the reason that we did a culture map was to elevate the awareness and build audiences for arts and culture. So no, we're not listing the sporting events. Mm-hmm. So there, and no, we might not list the mountain bike conference. Unless there are cultural components. So there's a challenge there, because even with our BIA, who's wonderfully supportive, also has to support their members that might not have culture in their mandate or do cultural events that they can list. So there is a challenge there. And I don't know, something about digital discoverability, if it's worth being listed on multiple calendars as well, because if everybody's on one, yes, it makes it really easy for the user, and that's why we want this to be the arts and culture hub. But because our focus is elevating arts and culture, even when we were working with the North Shore News to have a shared map, we were filtering. So if someone in the community was listing, I don't mean to keep going to sporting events, but if they were listing a sporting event, we were going to filter that out, and we weren't going to put it on anyway. So if they wanted that type of event, they would still have to go to that calendar. So it is, there are pros and cons to it, but while we're still trying to fulfill our mandate of elevating arts and culture and building that engagement, we're going to focus on arts and culture. So we are, yes, going to reach out to organizations and encourage them to list on our map, but we also list elsewhere as well as an organization. Because we have different municipalities. Like the North Vancouver Recreation and Culture Commission has a calendar that we list on. So.
Okay, I think we have 1 minute for a very quick question, perhaps over here. Yeah.
Love it. I'm from the city of Vancouver, so I can't wait to check this out. Thank you for the presentation. I wondered if you had given any idea to geocaching.
Sorry, do you mind to repeat the question?
Sure.
Because online they cannot
Oh,
hear
okay.
the question.
I wondered if you had given any thought to geocaching for future iterations of this tool for the intangible assets.
Well, we have, I mean, the treasure hunts go there. They do. The Museum of North Vancouver does geocaching, Minova, and that's one thing also that I'm not sure if we mentioned it, but we're trying to avoid duplication as well. So, and that's the beauty of this tool is we see what others are doing, so we'll do something a little bit differently, or we'll work together. We actually are about to get started on our next upcoming treasure hunt that might involve Craft Beer Week, but I believe the museum is also doing something similar that might be geocaching, so we're going to work together. So we're not going to go down the geocaching road yet, but I'm not saying never, because there are opportunities that keep presenting themselves.
Okay, I think we have to wrap up. I'm so sorry, but I invite you to come and chat to us afterwards. We'd love to talk to you some more, and yeah, come visit the merch table. We also have a sign-up form for that quarterly update that Michelle mentioned, so you can be kept in the loop as well that way. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Michelle and Harriet. A small gift from CCNC.
Thank you very much.
Hello. Hi, everyone. We are about to get started with our Public Art Year in Review momentarily, but I did want to draw your attention very quickly to the activity on your table. And if you have it in you to do a little public art of your own at your table during the presentation, I know that there's maybe some prizes to be won. So I just wanted to make sure you're aware of that. Also, I have a rogue cell phone. If it doesn't belong to me, I'm sure it belongs to one of you. If you are missing yours, please come find me and I'll have it.
All right, welcome back, everybody, from your wonderful morning of presentations and discussion. I know that there's all kinds of great ideas flowing. I want to thank very much Michael Trujan, who was our musician for over lunch today. So let's give him a big round of applause. Thank you, Michael. From the City of London. All right, so I have a few announcements. Okay, so first of all, there's a lovely table in the lobby over there, and there you can look at things from CCNC, like, for example, our cultural mapping toolkit and our cultural planning toolkit and various things like that, but they are not for the taking. So if you have decided that you'd really like to have one of those, and you thought that it was okay, please bring it back, and then you can go and download it for free online, okay? So no problem, we'll give it to you for free, but please bring back the copies so that everybody can see them. Thank you very much. Next, I want to say some thank yous. I want to thank the City of Toronto for sponsoring yesterday's lunch. Thank you very much, City of Toronto. I want to thank Bloom for sponsoring our network break, and also Bloom has left brochures on the table, so if you're interested in talking to the folks at Bloom, please pick up those brochures. They were supposed to go in your delegate bags, but unfortunately we didn't have them in time, so please pick those brochures up. And I also want to thank the City of Moncton, who have been sponsoring the discussion rooms, so thanks very much to the City of Moncton. For our virtual folks, okay, I just want to let you know that the virtual roundtables are coming up at 2:45 and 3:30, and the festival events roundtable will be hosted by me, but using the same materials that were used in the discussion room, so we'll be combining all of that. And now it gives me great pleasure to introduce someone very special to CCNC. That is Rachel Pennington from the City of Mississauga, who sits on our Public Art Network Committee and is also responsible for walking you through the public
Mississauga of the Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Huron-Wendat, and Wyandot Nations. I'm also a member of CCNC's Public Art Network Council, which is how I became lucky enough to stand in front of you all today. I have some fellow speakers who will be revealed shortly, so I just want to remind those speakers to please make sure you're sitting at the front of the room. So for those of you who aren't familiar with PAN, CCNC's Public Art Network is made up of public art program administrators representing public art programs and initiatives across Canada. We meet monthly to assist CCNC in its public art engagement, online content, and event programming. And there's actually a fair number of us around here this conference, so if you see anyone with a public art button, please ask. They might actually be on PAN. So the Public Art Year in Review is PAN's opportunity to showcase what is new and exciting about Canada's public art sector. We want to celebrate artworks of all scope and scale and recognize the diverse ways artists and municipalities respond to their local environments. So to choose this selection of artworks, we issued an open call for submissions. Projects could be completed in 2019, 2020, or 2021. And then we had a jury of PAN members, and I will say those PAN members did not submit projects themselves. It was no biases in this selection process. And those PAN members evaluated and selected the submissions based on some criteria, we looked for outstanding artistic merit, innovative processes and site specificity, and exceptional impact. And because we wanted to showcase the excellence of public art across the country, we also considered the diversity of voice, geographic region, project types, and budgets. So today, I'm going to MC you through a tour of public art across the country, and I hope it gives you all as much inspiration and pride as it gave me. So I'd like to welcome our first speaker and first project, Carol Ann Ryan, Public Art Coordinator from the City of Barrie.
Are you going to tell me when? Yeah. Tell me like when I'm on, or my time? Yeah. Okay. Hi, everybody. I'm excited to speak with you today to share about Brightening Barriers, which is a temporary exhibition of public art that we organized in the city of Barrie in 2021. The intention behind the project was a COVID recovery project at the height of the pandemic, also following a revitalization of Barrie's downtown. The idea was that we were using traditional barriers such as patio fencing to actually bring our community together through a cultural experience. The exhibition was planned, like I said, the first time in 2021. It was so successful that we repeated it in 2022. It just closed actually last week. In year one, the project was supported by the federal government through the Canadian Healthy Communities Initiative. And this past year, it was partially fundraised by our Public Art Committee and partially supported by the Public Art Reserve at the City of Barrie. The project very much hinged on local partnerships. It was strongly supported by our downtown BIA, who helped us build relationships and market the project. We worked with downtown business owners who allowed us the use of their patio fencing, both permanent and temporary. Over the course of the two exhibitions, we were able to hire 13 artists, 2 artist teams, to commission them to create what amounted to 15 original artwork installations. The artists had a few parameters with this project. The idea was that they had to create an original work of art that could be affixed to a patio structure. It had to withstand the environmental conditions for a 3 to 4 month outdoor exhibition, largely between May and September. And it had to come down from the patio without causing any damage. And we also were able to develop some programs. Those also fortunately evolved over the 2 years of the exhibition, largely as COVID restrictions lifted. In 2021, we created a self-guided walking tour pamphlet. We also created a scavenger hunt for families. Those were available both online and in paper. We repeated those, updated them a bit for the 2022 edition. And what resulted was largely a project that was accessible to anyone in our community, no matter how they were, how they found themselves in our downtown core, whether they were patronizing businesses, whether they were simply walking by, living in the neighborhood. We hopefully encouraged people to support the businesses. We created an uplifting experience for our community at a dark time when we first developed the project. And we hope we created something that was surprising and delightful for everyone who found themselves downtown Barrie during the time of the exhibition. Thank you.
I was very strict with everyone on how much time they had. So thank you, Carol. We now travel to Quebec, and unfortunately, Vie de Montréal could not be here with us today, so I'm going to try my best to present this monumental work by artist Nadia Mir. So this project began as part of the reconstruction of a section of the Bonaventure Expressway and as part of the Quartier Bonaventure Projet on the occasion of the 375th anniversary of the founding of Montreal. So in 2018, the artist Nadia Mir was selected by a jury of 7 people from across Canada, and it was through an open call to artists by the Public Art Bureau. Dans l'attente while waiting underlines and celebrates centuries of Indigenous presence in the Montreal territory and contemplates the presence there of Indigenous peoples today. It was inspired by a reproduction of the Great Peace Treaty, which was signed on August 4th, 1701. You can see it at, oh, they moved the slide. Well, you could see it in the top right corner. And the work portrays likenesses of, yes, that's it. You can move to the next one now. The work portrays likenesses of human and animal forms, places, and objects, symbolizing the signatures of the representatives of the 39 Indigenous nations ensconced in the area of Montreal when the gathering occurred. The work is composed of 4 human-scale groupings of bronze sculptures arranged in the grassy space of the block. The grouping of sculptures superimposing a selection of outlines of figures playfully evokes gathering and community spirit. Artist Nadia Mir, born in Montreal, is a member of the Kitigan Zibi Anishinaabeg Algonquin Nation. Her practice involves a rediscovery of objects intrinsic to the founding peoples of North America, especially those of the First Nations, in a transcultural approach. Dans l'attente while waiting is situated less than a kilometer from the sites associated with the Great Peace and commemorates this historically important event. So we have a short video that was submitted, so we'll play that now. So I think we can give them all a round of applause for that project. Okay, I'd now like to invite our next speaker and our next project. Please welcome Colin Zip, Public Art Manager for Steps Public Art. I told you to sit at the front.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Rachel. That's why I wasn't allowed to sit at the front. Sorry. So, led by Steps Public Art, Safe Light Home is a community-based public art project that offered free arts workshops for local community members of all ages, resulting in a series of highly visible public artworks. They launched in the spring of 2021. So we were joined in this project by lead artist Fats Patrol and our partner Flap Canada, who's a global leader in protecting birds from the hazards of urban environments. To learn more about how migratory birds can be better protected in urban environments, we were able to collaborate with Fats Patrol and local community members to protect the fall migration of birds at various TTT stations. Workshop participants learned mark-making techniques as they explored themes of local bird species, migration patterns, and life cycles. The work generated during these online workshops, it was also done during the pandemic, was digitally collaged, and the artist then turned several of these drawings into temporary vinyl window murals that reflect the community and help protect migratory birds and select TTT subway stations in North York against collisions. And connecting the project with the fall migration allowed participants and those connected through our engagement sessions an opportunity to better see the direct impact of their project involvement. The low barrier intergenerational arts workshops offer community members a chance to connect and learn a variety of art processes and techniques from the lead artist. And they also co-created 20 vinyl murals installed throughout the community. And Safe Flight Home was targeted towards youth aged 14 to 29, and then offered mentorship opportunities, including skill and capacity building in each phase of the project. And then we're currently working on AR activations of the different vinyl murals of the TTC stations, as well as a video, which I think is on the next slide, created by artist Seneca 360. So a little bit longer, so I'll post the link on the app. So. That's great. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you, Colin. So we are now going to travel across the country to British Columbia. So the city and district of North Vancouver, who commissioned these next two projects, couldn't be here in person, so I'm going to try my best to capture these impactful projects. But if you have any questions, you can connect with Laurie Phillips from North Vancouver. She is in attendance virtually. So Lynn Valley Love, commissioned by the District of North Vancouver, is an impactful and healing public art initiative that responded to a community tragedy. On March 27th, 2021, the Lynn Valley community experienced a random act of violence that ultimately took one person's life and injured several others. One of the many responses to this tragedy took the form of a community-engaged art project designed to support the general healing process and reclaim the civic space as a place where love and peace endures. So under the creative guidance of local artist Breen Campbell, community members were invited to help spread the love and healing by participating in one of two projects that based on individual skill levels. The Love X Stitch project invited community participants of all skill levels to hand stitch an X to show their love and contribute to the community creation of an X-stitched love quilt. The artists prepared do-it-yourself kits that included fabric and instruction to create these X squares for the quilt. And the goal was to receive 700 sewn X squares, and they ended up doubling that, which is just such an amazing impact. So the extra squares allowed for the creation of additional components of the project, including 2 large cross-stitched hearts. The Stairwell of Love project invited more experienced quilters to share messages of love, strength, and peace on long quilted banners that are now on display inside the library stairwell. The artist provided sewing instructions, desired dimensions, free lettering patterns for quilting, and color palette guidelines. And the hope was to receive 30 banners, and again, this goal was far surpassed with the submission of 68 hand-quilted banners from local participants and other quilters from across Canada and even internationally, all sending their messages of love and healing to North Vancouver. So I just think that's an incredible project. This next project is also from North Vancouver, but this time it's from the city of North Vancouver. So in the spring of 2017, the RCMP liaison on the North Shore Violence Against Women in Relationships Committee proposed to commission and install a carved First Nations pole in Stella Jodine Plaza directly adjacent to the North Vancouver RCMP detachment building. And the pole was to feature traditional Coast Salish symbols of strength and remembrance to honor all women who have experienced gender violence. The City of North Vancouver, through its public art program, reviewed the proposal and agreed to accept and fully support it, providing funding, land, ownership of the pole as a community amenity for everyone. And the result is a carved red cedar pole standing in remembrance of the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls across Canada, the 14 women murdered in the Montreal Massacre, and all women who suffer in silence as victims of violence. At the top of the pole is a woman wrapped in a blanket with eyes closed in a peaceful state to honor all loved ones who have suffered. And below her is an eagle imparted with the power to carry prayers to the Creator. Hands carved into the chest of the eagle invite people to place their hands on the pole and silently send their own messages, or simply take a quiet moment to internally reflect. The unveiling of the pole was a powerful moment of healing when families of loved ones, members of the 2 local First Nations, and RCMP members gathered to grieve and acknowledge together. And today, annual memorials are held at this location, and school groups visit the pole for engaged learning sessions. So as I mentioned earlier, Laurie Phillips from the City and District of North Vancouver is here virtually, so please give her a round of applause for these projects and connect with her virtually. I'd now like to introduce Alia Amarshi and Miko Hoffman, who are representing the public art team from the City of Vancouver.
Thank you. So we are actually on the grants team, but we're here to talk about the good work and read the good words of our colleagues. So Lise Lemieux's Personnage was commissioned by Governor Americas to fulfill the City of Vancouver public art requirement for private development. The commissioning process was led by art consultant Maureen Smith. The public art vision was to provide public art that enriched the experience of the public realm for the people living and working in and around the site. Am I doing the slides? Or next slide, please. Thanks. The artwork is a series of 9 figures, each around 22 feet tall, composed of smalty cut glass mosaic tiles and integrated into the exterior structural columns of the Pacific, an apartment building in downtown Vancouver. The figures reference the caryatid, classic female figures that serve as columns in ancient Greek structures, notably on the Acropolis in Athens, where they have served through centuries of change. Similarly, Lemieux's Personnage stand as witnesses to certain individuals and activities as the neighborhood and city change around them. Lemieux's figures, abstract but each with distinctive character, are derived from initial watercolor studies of people on the street, images that were then translated into Photoshop and fragmented into small glass tiles to be composed as giant mosaics, work done in collaboration with Mosaica in Montreal. Mosaics have traditionally been used to tell stories in both public and domestic spaces. These 9 figures imply that history of narrative and build a larger, cohesive whole from very small parts, just much like community. Next slide, please. As the artist Alison Harablick says in her text about the work, Lemieux conceived these figures as a way of bearing witness to the extraordinary existence we share when we live so closely together. Although many of us are strangers, we are connected through our daily interactions. We pass one another in the street, listen to each other's voices from our balconies, and quietly look out for each other. The figures that make up Personnage are monuments to these subtle encounters in life. Lise Lemieux's practice is focused primarily on drawing, sculpture, and installation, and maintains an interest in the human figure. Originally from Ottawa, Lemieux currently resides in Vancouver. Her work has been exhibited nationally and internationally. She was the 2017 recipient of the Viva Award for its outstanding achievement and commitment of a mid-career artist from the Doris and Jack Shadbolt Foundation for the Visual Arts. And now, Alia will be here to talk about the public art program's platforms artist calls.
Thanks. Thanks, Miko. The public art program at the City of Vancouver has run its platforms program intermittently since 2010. The works commissioned for platforms are 2-dimensional, temporary, and exhibited on a number of public-facing platforms throughout the city. The opportunities include transit shelter posters, digital advertising screens, semi-translucent vinyl on glass, billboards, video screens, and banners. The works are installed for between 1 month and 1 year, depending on the individual platform. The program is marked by constant energy and movement, with new artworks being installed and publicized monthly. All That We Cannot Grasp by Romain Bladou, that you see here, is a photographic work depicting the artist's shadow over water. The work is about reflection and groundlessness and contains a subtle menace, something that can often accompany a time of great uncertainty. Next slide, please. The energy and quick turnover of the Platforms program poised it to become a good opportunity for artists to create work that was responsive to our contemporary moment. When Vancouver started to shut down in March 2020 due to the pandemic, we initiated Platforms 2020 Public Works. In recognition of the economic hardships underway in the cultural sector, we ended up commissioning 35 artists whose work reflected on social isolation, on disability, uncertainty, and illness. As the year progressed and the Black Lives Matter movement drew attention to racialized violence, we commissioned works that also addressed these issues. Out of Many by Tafui is a series of 6 large vinyl banners installed in the Central Library. It is inspired by the similarities of racialized and Indigenous cultures around the globe and by the Jamaican national motto, out of many, one people. Sunny Nestler's billboard is a reproduction of Coneworm Flow, an acrylic painting that the artist produced in March 2020 during a residency at the Banff Centre that was evacuated due to the COVID-19 lockdown. The work looks at the body, biology, and illness precipitated by hostile microorganisms. Next slide, please. In 2021, we continued the Platform series with a new call, Platforms, We Are Here, Live. This call shifted its intent to consider work that looked at the still unfolding pandemic and the deepening of the social, health, and economic inequities that were being revealed and magnified by COVID-19. The commissioned works overwhelmingly dealt with the fatigue of ongoing isolation, the smaller orbits we've become habituated to, and the hesitancy in and desire to make connection with others. 25 artists were commissioned in this Platforms iteration. Guadalupe Martinez's Shared Bodies is a 2-channel video that looks at the invaluable intimacy and sharing of care and knowledge among a group of women. Roadside Diary by the Bagua Artist Association is a digital drawing illustrating daily scenes of the lockdown. This work reflected on the impacts of COVID-19 on vulnerable groups in Vancouver, as well as occurrences of discrimination and violence in our city. And lastly, Deanna Chong's Pandemic Pics is a series of drawings that were presented on 20 digital screens throughout the city. These were originally conceived on Instagram, loosely around the idea of hair, but when the deaths of Breonna Taylor and countless others filled the news, the artist scanned, altered, and reversed the drawings, creating exploding and flowering hair pics, reflecting on her thoughts on the world being on fire. Thank you.
My more experienced PAN members told me it would be so hard to keep everyone on time, but you guys are great. Okay, so we now travel back to Ontario and to my home municipality, the city of Mississauga. So I'm very proud and honored to present these next 2 public art projects from our collection. Orchard is a work of public land art. It celebrates partnerships and brings members of the art, food, and urban agricultural communities together. It consists of 12 apple trees, so it really expands our ideas of what public art can be. The Public Art Program commissioned this unique public art project by the artist Diane Borsado. And as a work of land art, it's a living entity. That means it is constantly changing in form and function, always according to the artist's wishes. So in terms of the varietals that were chosen, planted and placed, that was all conducted by the artist. The types of programming and engagement that we will be running is all detailed and led by the artist, who has kind of set it up to foster community and growth and become something new and reused. The apple trees in Orchard were chosen for their eccentricity, beauty, taste, history, and rarity. Apple varietals include white winter pearmain, Baxter, sleeping beauty, black gillyflower, pineapple renetta, and the red-fleshed pink pearl, representing Mississauga's natural heritage. And if you're like me, you have no idea about any of those varietals. I learned them at our inauguration event. They are all kind of endangered, going extinct apple varietals that you can really only find at heritage orchards. To unveil the artwork, the City of Mississauga partnered with Ontario Culture Days and the Toronto Biennial of Art to commission a performance artwork by Diane Borsato. It was called You Are a Good Apple, and it was free. We had attendees came and were invited to taste these unusual and historic apples, learn about community orchards, and the importance of protecting and being stewards of our land. It featured a drop-in apple tasting, free Syrian apple cake from the Newcomer Kitchen, and presentations by Diane Borsato, the orchardist she worked with, and a community gardens and orchard specialist. So since its inauguration, Orchard continues to be a site for engagement, education, reflection, and apple harvesting. A professional orchardist and team of volunteers maintain the tree, and the artist recently installed deer protection cages. The Small Arms Inspection building staff, they follow the artist's guidelines around programming, specifically focusing on activities that acknowledge culture, nature, and beauty as a positive force in our world. And I can honestly say that I never expected to be placing sponges soaked in natural deer repellent around apple trees in my career in art and history, but if you know public art, you know that that could happen to you. So this next project, I wish my colleague Philippa French could be here because she is the brains behind this innovative public art project. But she is attending virtually, so if you have questions, please reach out to her and I will try to do her justice. So the Sculpture Court Skate Park is located in downtown Mississauga next to our Civic Center. It's largely home to local Mississauga skateboarders and teenagers, so it has a very strong community feel. In 2021, we decided to build on this community by creating a dedicated exhibition space for local and emerging artists who wanted to expand their work into the public realm. And we kind of saw this as a perfect opportunity to be a bit more experimental in our processes as well. So thinking about how do we create better equity, diversity, and representation in our collection, we saw this park as a perfect opportunity to try out some new things. So for the call to artists, we issued a blind call, so it was anonymous. And we designed it specifically for emerging artists. This meant that the selection committee was only viewing the artist's portfolio, and they did not receive any identifying information about the applicants. We also didn't even ask for CVs or resumes. We asked them to submit an expression of interest and images of past work. There were no requirements to submit renderings or drawings. And then to further reduce barriers to inclusion in the project, we held a virtual information session about how to put together a strong application. And we had 50 local artists attend that information session, and then we recorded it and made it available to anyone who couldn't attend the live event. The winning artist, Ray Vidal, created Ebb and Flow, a digital mural series depicting the constant flow of energy that skateboarders and breakdancers channel to create something cosmic that can change the course of someone's life. Ray is a skateboarder who has used the park since he was a teenager, so he had a strong connection with the local park users, and he was able to engage with them to create this series. So it really contributes to that sense of belonging, connection, safety, and self-reflection. During the development, he reached out to local skateboarders, breakdancers, and rollerbladers. He asked what they were interested in seeing. He photographed them, and then he memorialized them essentially in each of the panels. We also worked with him through the fabrication process, so he received some help and guidance on working with subcontractor relationships. After the artwork was installed, the artist worked with the city to plan an unveiling. He played with his local band, and we got to see all these incredible skateboarders just enjoying the park and making it. We've been talking in the discussion rooms about placekeeping, and I really think that this was a great example of placekeeping. So that's Mississauga. If you want to clap for me, you can. Next up, I'd like to introduce Taylor Norris, Public Art Coordinator for the City of Kingston.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Taylor Norris. I'm Public Art Coordinator for the City of Kingston, and I'm here to talk about Manadoo Agdidagon Spirit Garden, our commemorative public art project in collaboration with the Alderville First Nation. So I had the responsibility, honor, and privilege of executing Manadoo Agdidagon Spirit Garden to commemorate the time of the Mississaugas of the Alderville First Nation on the land that we now call the City of Kingston. I executed this project in full collaboration with the Alderville First Nation, the City of Kingston, and the artist Terrence Radford. And this project took close to 9 years from original conception to launch. And we launched it last year in 2021. And the project began when the Alderville First Nation approached the City of Kingston requesting a commemorative plaque to commemorate the time that they were on this land. And the City of Kingston came back and said, well, how about a public art project? So the Alderville First Nation was displaced from the land from the City of Kingston's now territory via the, sorry, I'm very nervous. I love this project so much, and I want to do it honor. You know, it took us 9 years to get here, and it will be fully established in 2024. So it's just, the legacy of this work is incredibly important. So the Mississaugas of the Alderville First Nation were displaced off this land via the Crawford Purchase, and moved to their now First Nation near Coburg. And I joined the city in 2017 and was handed this project as our first ever public art project when we launched our new public art master plan in 2015. And I took over the work from my colleagues in Heritage Services. And we had never done anything like this before. And I quickly learned that if we were going to do this right, we were going to have to build a process completely in collaboration with Alderville. And so over 4.5 years, we visited Alderville many times with the shortlisted artists and then with the selected artist, Terrence, and with city staff to ensure that the project was truly reflective of the nation and their story. Terrence created Manadoo Agdidagon in total consultation with Alderville, with their chief, Dave Mowat, elders, including Rick Beaver and John Matson, and community, along with the Black Oak Savannah, which is a conservation area on the nation. Each element, plant, paver, everything is anchored in meaning and connection to Alderville and their story, including wampum belts, 430 native plants, and the medicine wheel. Each plant was selected in consultation with the Black Oak Savannah, and they even helped us purchase and source a lot of them. So this is it's a medicine garden. It looks so much different today than it does on these slides. It's the great thing about a garden is they continuously grow, but people are welcome to harvest the medicinal plants that are in our garden, and we do lots of teachings and engagement on site. The work is fully accessible. There's a waterfront pathway that leads from the work from the parking lot, a fully accessible parking lot, all the way down to the water. And this site was selected in collaboration with Alderville as well. We offered them 5 sites, and they selected this site at Lake Ontario Park because of its proximity to the water. So having that accessible pathway was really important. You can see it. It's the one that comes down. So Manadoo Agdidagon is a garden and requires care, much like the relationship we have established with the Alderville First Nation and the nations whose land we now reside in the City of Kingston. And this project is a living embodiment of the ongoing work that we continue to do to honor our responsibility to truth, reconciliation, and reparations in Kingston and across this nation. So I hope you come and find me after and ask any questions you might have. There's so many beautiful elements in this work that I would love to share with all of you. And if you ever come to Kingston, let me know, and we'll go check it out. Thank you.
Thank you, Taylor. So our last project was submitted by Innisfil Idea Lab and Library. They couldn't be here today, and I'm particularly sad about that because I was recently admiring their reconciliation section on their website. But anyways, if you haven't seen it, it's very good. I'll try to do them justice here. So the Innisfil Idea Lab and Library, in partnership with the town of Innisfil and local ice fishing hut operator Gale's Hotbox Ice Huts, launched the Innisfil Ice Hut Art Project. They wanted to reimagine a common site on frozen Lake Simcoe, ice fishing huts. 13 local artists transformed 11 plywood huts into vibrant works of art, which were installed in community spaces across Innisfil. The artists were selected through an open call to ensure that this project was inclusive and representative of the perspective and stories of all residents. Innisfil Arts, Culture and Heritage Council, Uplift Black, and Barrie Area Native Advisory Circle were consulted and formed part of the jury. The community response to the project was overwhelmingly positive. Innisfil is a geographically large municipality with pockets of community separated by highways and farmland. Locating the huts across the municipality allowed both for serendipitous discovery and for planned tours with residents and visitors seeking out the installations in all corners of Innisfil. Each artist brought their unique style to the project, so while most of the huts were painted, some artists used a variety of media. Timothy Lauren affixed carved wood blocks to his hut, Talisman, and that were representative of kitsch pop culture items from the 1960s and iconography that spoke to his heritage as a member of the Métis Nation of Ontario. An artist team led by Aaron Sanderson used pyrography to etch scenes onto the hut, Lady Simcoe, Silent Solitude. The number of ice hut canvases available allowed for a diverse representation of the community. Artist Angela Ojla's designs for Fulkari Quilt House drew inspiration from the pattern and motifs found in traditional Punjabi Fulkari embroidery, while Tamara Benoir's Harvesting the Hard Winter was inspired by Lake Simcoe's ice harvesting history. The Innisfil Ice Hut Art Project created an outdoor art gallery, a respite from the dreary winter blues, and created opportunities for much-needed connection across communities, across cultures, and within neighborhoods. So please give them a round of applause. Okay, so I'm exceptionally impressed that we did all of this in this short period of time, which means a couple of things. You all can do your sculpture building activity now. I also would just like to say this year we didn't receive any submissions from the East Coast or the territories. So if your municipality is from one of these regions, I strongly encourage you to apply. Next year, we really want to see all areas of Canada represented. And I just ask my fellow speakers to stand up, please. So if you have any questions, please reach out directly to us at the networking break this afternoon. We have some virtual attendees as well, so look for them on the list. And you can talk to them through the Whova app. And with that, that's our Public Art Year in Review. Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks very much to Rachel Pennington for hosting the Public Art Year in Review. Let's give her a round of applause. And now you have about 15 minutes before our next panel, so use that wisely in your sculpture building on the table, and I'll be back in a few minutes. Hello, everyone. I'm back. This time I don't have any announcements. All right, so I'm going to ask if we could have our panelists. If we could get our panelists to come up to the front now. That's Barbara Fillion, Larissa DeRosier, Janice Montour, and Perry Stein. I just called them. Oh. Hello, everybody in virtual land. Everybody, give a hand to the virtual delegates. Yay, virtual delegates. Hope you're having a great time out there in virtual land. Here we go. Here comes our panel. Come right up. Have a seat. All right, welcome to this afternoon's panel. So our panel today focuses on Indigenous protocols, and I would like to introduce a very important person at the CCNC who is going to be hosting this panel. Her name is Barbara Fillion, and Barbara comes from, I'm going to look at my notes here, just a moment, here we go. Barbara is the program officer for the Canadian Commission for UNESCO. She's previously worked as a consultant and served as the Reconciliation Program Director at the Canadian Museums Association. Prior to that, she was the Director of Education at Working Assumptions, a national organization based in Berkeley, California, that uses art to examine social issues. Barbara has over 20 years of experience in the museum field. She taught and was a thesis advisor in the Museum Studies program at JFK University in California, and has also served as the Associate Director of the Archaeology Museum at the University of South Alabama in Mobile, Alabama. Barbara grew up in the region of La Mauricie in Quebec and is a member of the Innu Nation of Matuiash. I'd also like to mention that Barbara is one of our steering committee members for the Cultural Resilience Project, and Barbara and I will be talking about the next phase of UNESCO Creative City Network membership through the Canadian context. So I just wanted to let you know that there's a particular relationship with us. I'll talk a little bit about that tonight when we introduce our keynote speaker. So now please welcome Barbara Fillion.
Thank you, Kathleen, for that introduction. Thank you to the Creative City Network of Canada and your whole team for putting together this great summit. It's a real honor to be here as a guest in the traditional territories of the Haudenosaunee, the Anishinaabe, and the Adiwandorok peoples. So today we'll be exploring how municipalities can further advance truth and reconciliation with our wonderful panelists. We have Larissa DeRosier, who is a programs director at CARFAC National. We have Perry Stein with us, who is project planning lead at the City of Lethbridge in Alberta. And we have Janice Montour, who is the executive director of the Woodland Cultural Center. And I'll start by asking our panelists to tell us a little bit more about themselves and the work that they do. Larissa, do you want to start?
Thanks so much, Barbara. Yeah, I definitely reflect, your acknowledgement and the respect that you have for the original peoples of this land. I'm Larissa DeRosier. Again, I am programs director for CARFAC National. I started out as the workshop manager for the Indigenous Protocols.art project, which is basically just a resourceful and reflective online space and resource guide that CARFAC developed with an Indigenous-led advisory circle. Basically just talking about meaningful and respectful engagement with Indigenous artists, curators, knowledge keepers, and just Indigenous folks. I'm a musician, a bead worker, a singer-songwriter. I've been at Carleton University for about 5 years and then took a break and started my beadwork business, Bengi Shimon Beadwork, just doing earrings in random orders, which led me to CARFAC, and I'm very grateful to be here speaking to you today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Janice. Larissa, you wear many hats.
Yeah, for sure.
Perry, do you want to introduce yourself a little?
Sure. Okay, itamix ganatani studentaniko mistaxi pita nimatuto sikokatuk. My name is Perry Stein. I work with the city of Lethbridge in southern Alberta. I am not an Indigenous person, so I want to honor the privileged space that I'm here with the three of you and for allowing me to participate in this panel. My background, I am from southern Alberta originally. My wife's family is Anishinaabe from the Sault Ste. Marie region. So while I may not connect to this in my own lived experience, the work that I've been doing for over the past decade really speaks to me in terms of the cities in the world that I'm creating for my wife and my children who are Jewish and Anishinaabe, which is kind of an interesting combination. My background professionally is started in Latin American studies and ended up being in land use planning. I've worked in the field of planning in urban and rural and Indigenous community contexts across Western Canada for about 10 years. 4 years ago, I had the privilege of building the City of Lethbridge's Indigenous Relations Office, and I worked in that space for about 3 years. And in the past few months, I've transitioned back to a kind of a planning role, but still get to work closely with my colleagues in Indigenous relations and public art and planning to work in kind of more of an economic development, revitalization, placemaking capacity. So I often say like the 10% of my work, which involves cultural planning and public art, I wish it was all of my work, because planning can be a bit dry and policy oriented, and this is where the fun happens, and this is where well-being really comes to the surface. So again, thank you and happy to be here.
Thank you, Perry. And last but certainly not least, Janice.
Sego go hondo de yangats gnak gahaga ni go onjonto at lawala no git dolonto. Greetings. My traditional name is Gohondukta. My English name is Janice Montour. I am Mohawk Nation Turtle Clan from Six Nations of the Grand River, so you're in our traditional territory here in Waterloo. Yeah, I'm the executive director at the Woodland Cultural Center. I've been there since 2003. I've taken a few secondments and worked at Harbourfront Center as a guest artistic director. I have also, for 3 years, worked as a director of tourism and cultural initiatives at the Six Nations of the Grand River Development Corporation, and returned back to Woodland in 2020. So right now I'm forging ahead in a very huge capital campaign for the restoration of the Mohawk Institute Residential School, which is one of the buildings on our site that we manage as part of Woodland. And I also guest instruct at Centennial College in arts policy, equity, and activism, among the many other hats and chairperson roles I do and a number of board of directors I sit on. But yeah, that's me.
Thank you. Glad I asked you to introduce yourselves because you all wear so many hats, so hard to keep track. I'd like to start by asking you, what's a good starting point for a municipality who wants to build relationships with neighboring Indigenous communities and also with Indigenous peoples that are living within their municipality? Perry, I'm going to pick on you.
Sure. So this actually came up in one of the workshop sessions this morning about oftentimes in municipal government we get these requests from our leaders or our city councilors to, hey, reconciliation's important, go do reconciliation work and make it happen. And I was reflecting on, I think it was one of the cities in Ontario talked about they had 90 days to implement a public art project, and that's oftentimes what happens. So my advice is to actually not do that. It's to spend time, invest your own personal and professional energy into relationship building. Before the city of Lethbridge really started doing a lot of meaningful work around traditional knowledge, landscape ecology from a Blackfoot perspective. I think I spent 3 years going to meetings with the consultation departments of the Blackfoot Confederacy Nations on a bi-monthly basis, just to sit in the room as a fly on the wall, listen to the priorities, listen to what was important, to build those relationships organically. And then when I found that opportunity of values alignment, of opportunity, that's when that relationship building could then be transitioned from really a space of non-transaction to a space where we identified mutual benefit. And I think often we approach this work from the perspective of transactions, and that I want something, you're in the way, what can I give you to allow me to do this thing that's important to me over here? And that's just not the right way to approach this work. So I think investing time and energy at the front end is the most important way to start.
Thank you. Yeah, this work does take time, and I think also thinking about capacity when you engage in that work and making sure that you can sustain that relationship. And what are your thoughts, Larissa?
Likewise. Yeah, this is something I thought about a lot when developing the workshops for CARFAC. We basically did 3, pointed workshops, one for Indigenous artists, one for non-Indigenous artists, and then one for organizations. So galleries, museums, artist-run centers. And I was like, okay, so first of all, like, who am I to tell galleries what they need to be doing? But it really got me to reflect on, like, my own experiences in just like the art world and the music world, and as an artist, what my values were, what my priorities were. And I remember telling the story in one of my workshops, but basically it's just, I am a lot more likely to connect and feel comfortable when, like you say, when we wear our hats, when we take them off, when you can just connect as a person, as another human being, and find that common ground, and go through that engagement period where you are taking your professional hat off. We know why you're there. As an artist, I know why you're here talking to me. That there is eventually something you want, but what I value is that trust building. Right, when we think about history and where we are with reconciliation right now, there's still a lot of distrust, and we're still repairing that. So it's really important when you're asking something of someone, especially an artist, a knowledge keeper, an elder, to ensure that relationship is reciprocal, that you are giving and taking. Giving while you are taking, you know what I mean? So I guess my thing is just, the power of asking, the power of listening. There is so much power in both of those things, and learning how to listen without keeping your hat on. And just, connecting as people. That's all I have to say for now.
Thank you. Those are so many good points that you put forth. And I think in terms of trust building, and that's where that capacity piece really comes in, right? Because if you don't have the capacity to sustain the relationship and what you're moving towards, then if you stop, then the trust gets broken, and it's so much harder to start again.
Yeah, consistency too.
Yeah, consistency. Sure. Yeah. Janice, what are your thoughts?
I think for myself and the work that I've done over the last 20 years, a lot of it has been about developing that relationship and understanding that it takes a lot of time. We work closely, very much so, with the city of Brantford, and so that relationship sort of navigated for us through the sector of arts, culture, and tourism, right? So that's sort of how we came together at one table. We had sort of a shared understanding of what we wanted to accomplish, and I think in a way it makes it we're all coming at it with a different perspective, but we're all very open to what the possible outcome could be. But that relationship took many years in developing that, and now, I know Sarah's in the room. Me and Sarah have become really good friends, and this has been because we've been able to sit at a table and be very honest and be very open, and also acknowledge that there's steps that we both have to learn along the way of trying to sort of navigate that relationship, because there is a lot of historical trauma that is between our two communities at Six Nations in Brantford. So I think how we've been able to navigate that, take it out of the political realm in a way, is that we work on projects together in a collaborative way that can bring us both to the table. And, you know, as much as, you know, there may have been some things that Sarah needed from me or I needed from her, there's always this reciprocity between us, and being able to build on that. And even though I've left and other people have left, we've been able to keep those connections and maintain them sort of throughout the years, and that continues to grow, I think. But I think it's really, again, coming to the table and not necessarily asking for, and I was told this on the weekend by some survivors, that's not reconciliation, it's reconciliation. We need to start doing action, not just talking about it anymore. And so that's really maybe not coming at it from that point of view, but coming from something that brings you together through a shared experience versus a larger sort of ideology that is hard to tackle right now.
Yeah, very good points. Yeah, I've heard reconciliation too, and I think rooting it in concrete initiatives is really important. You also provided a good example of what it means to have an authentic relationship, right? And that takes time and some friendship and these kinds of things. And you've given us also an example that touches on my next question, which is what municipalities can do to advance truth and reconciliation and really decolonize spaces and places through cultural and artistic initiatives. Mm-hmm. So you've talked a little bit about that, but I'll ask you to expand a little.
I think some of the work that's happened with our organization and the city of Brantford, that's actually shows you like sort of the action and the support that we have from the city is when our Save the Evidence campaign started, it's a fundraising campaign to restore the Mohawk Institute Residential School. And our elected chief at the time challenged the other municipalities around us to match their donation of $220,000. The first one to match that was the city of Brantford. And it didn't take a lot of work, but I remember me and Sarah had to kind of go between some, documents. I had to go to city council and working on the verbiage of those documents. And again, even some of the efforts that the city has done around last summer, and then looking at the first, National Day of Truth and Reconciliation. Again, there was that constant dialogue between me and Sarah working on, okay, what does that look like? What is appropriate, what's not appropriate, and just being very open about those conversations and realizing that, there's going to be some hard times, but there's also some really great outcomes that can happen when we have those very honest conversations that need to happen. And the city's been super supportive of all the work that we've done and providing us support. I mean, I think Sarah's one of the first ones who reached out to me when my site was being bombarded with media and visitors every day last year. And she was like, what do you need? Like, what can we do? How can we help? And so that really shows you that you don't have to wait to be asked. You can actually really sort of come to the table. Like, what do you need? What can we do? Right? And that's, I think when we talk about that action piece, that's one of those things. Like, I was very, very grateful for the work, for the stuff that the city came to us to help us with, without me having to ask them. They just came to us like, what do you need?
That goes a long way.
Yeah,
exactly. Definitely. And I think you raised such an important point of having to, really, we need to have hard conversations sometimes, but it leads to better things, and we grow through that too. And that's part of making mistakes, right? Which is part of the title of this talk. So, well, yeah. What do you think, Larissa? The role of culture and arts in helping municipalities advance truth and reconciliation?
Oh man. Well, I'm loving seeing, funding being poured into, things like Indigenous artists and reconciliation and things like that. And, the initiatives giving Indigenous people a voice and space. On the other hand, I think we're all kind of missing a big, really important thing. And that's white supremacy and understanding what that is and how it affects our lives in very, very quiet ways that we may not even notice. But, just understanding that the reason why we're here and why Canada was allowed to basically be born was a white supremacist document, which was the Doctrine of Discovery, that enabled Spanish and I think English conquistadors to colonize over 80% of the world. It is a supremacist document that says, if you are not Christian, if you are not of this faith, you are not human, and therefore we don't have to respect you. We don't have to, treat you as people. The Doctrine of Discovery is still effective and in place today. It is still used in Canadian law. It is still alive. And what does that say? What does that say about this country? Because we're obviously not in the same mindset, but our history is rooted there. Indigenous history is connected to that. So I think a big, major, really, really uncomfortable piece of that is white supremacy. I understand how cringy and uncomfortable it is, but we really need to understand that this affects every single part of our lives. Capitalism affects every single part of our lives. Capitalism is not the only way for humans to live and to function, as we see, how Indigenous knowledge flourished for thousands of years. Not to say there wasn't never any intertribal conflict or territorial conflict, but it was effective. There was abundance and not scarcity. And now we're seeing the opposite, is there is only one group of people that is allowed to flourish. And that, in my opinion, all connects back to where this started, which was the Doctrine of Discovery. And I guess if we're thinking about now, of course, it's understanding and learning and befriending Indigenous folks in your communities, but it's also looking at yourself and looking inward and understanding, how do I uphold white supremacy? How does my institution or my organization uphold white supremacy? And it's not necessarily like you're going to change that in a day or in 10 years or in 50 years. But I think one of the most powerful things that people can do, and just especially cultural workers, arts workers, is understanding your place. I think that's the most key thing, and understanding who you are, where you come from, and how you relate to the people that you're working with. Because if you can't speak to yourself and understand who you are, how are you going to be able to respect where other people are coming from, that other people have cultures, that other people have roots, that we're all human beings living on this earth. We are all physiologically equal, but there are these certain distinctions within just our human experience that makes us different, and understanding what that looks like. I kind of just went on a tangent, but I hope that answers the question.
That was amazing, Larissa. Thank you so much for sharing that truth and reminding us of the truth part of the reconciliation of knowing these things, right? And being aware of the Doctrine of Discovery, and also reminding us that this journey of truth and reconciliation, whether you're Indigenous or not, starts from within, right? And it's a long road, and it's continual. There's no necessarily end point. Perry, what do you?
Yeah, I guess I'd approach the question building off of Larissa's point, and the one concept that I kind of anchor myself with most days is this idea of ethical space, which is something that people like Willie Ermine or Dr. Reg Croce talk a lot about. And I think there's a way of embodying that both in physical spaces, but also in the policy spaces that we so often either have to work within or have to kind of use as the foundation of the work that we're doing. And that, I think, takes lots of other forms too. So one of the ways that we've approached that in Lethbridge has been to work directly with Indigenous partners to co-design not just the way we approach engagement or policy making, but to actually have community tell us how they would like to be reflected in policy, how that structurally looks we were working on a couple years ago, I think in Ontario they call them official community plans, in Alberta they're municipal development plans. And we had meetings with our reconciliation committee talking about the existing, at that time, existing representation of Indigenous peoples in our MDP, which was relegated to like 2 sentences in the history of the city and 2 sentences when it came to like archaeological sites, which obviously doesn't, account for the full lived experience of, 15,000 years of being in a place, or making up 10% of the community's population, or being next to the largest reserve in Canada. So the one piece of advice that kind of, I think, hit most of our policymakers most strongly was, don't take us and stick us in a small section in the document. You have to weave the Indigenous experience across every single section of that document. So that MDP, which was passed by our council in 2021, the very first word in that document is Sikoktuk, which is the Blackfoot word for Lethbridge. And then the third word is Oki, which is hello in Blackfoot. So that was the introduction. There's an introduction by a Blackfoot elder, Nina Pixie. There's Indigenous peoples across economic development, governance, housing, parks, open spaces, infrastructure, planning. All of the sections reflect the feedback that was generated through processes that were co-designed with Indigenous peoples to ensure that their voices were reflected in the ways that they wanted to be. And I think when we're talking about like arts and culture programs and initiatives, those are models that can be replicated. And it's not so much what we think our priorities are as non-Indigenous peoples or policymakers, it's our ability to leverage the resources we have to action the priorities of community. And again, that goes back to relationship building. And then ultimately, when we are at that place where we have strong relationships, we understand the priorities, we have shared values, we have a shared understanding of history, that we can actually create these places of reconciliation in our communities. And that could be through arts and culture programming. And we've done that through like temporary public art projects, through alternative approaches to public art, through Indigenous landscape design. There's just no shortage of ways that we can do that. And it's actually really, really fun and exciting work. And that work itself builds stronger relationships. And sometimes it builds relationships between people who in other worlds would have no opportunity to connect. We had a project that we launched last week that brought together similar to another municipality in Ontario that we were talking about yesterday, brought together firefighters and 3 Blackfoot female artists who collaborated on this space together. And those are just and all parties found joy and benefit and fulfillment in that process. And that would otherwise not have happened, or it wouldn't have happened that way. So, yeah.
I think art can cross-pollinate everywhere and reach everyone. So I think that's kind of the beauty of where we see, often in government, everything is segregated, and art has that capacity to bring it all together. You also mentioned you shared 2 Blackfoot words with us, and so that brings me to my next question, which is about languages. So this year marks the beginning of the UN International's Decade of Indigenous Languages. And I think we all have a role to play in supporting the strengthening of Indigenous languages, whether you're Indigenous or not. And I was wondering what advice you have for municipalities who want to use Indigenous languages from their territories, either to rename, to name, go back to original place names, or maybe name buildings or streets. What advice do you have for them? And Janice, I'll ask you to start us off.
So one thing that my language department would say is that to do that work, you have to really sort of understand the history of that specific place. And really, it's not a simple translation. I think a lot of people think, oh, I'll give you a word like maple, and you're going to translate that for me. It's like, it's not maple. It's in our Haudenosaunee language, it's very verb-based, so some of our words, like even my traditional name, Gohondukta, is like this long to write out. That's very common, and then they'll say, well, can you do a shorter version? I'm like, no, it's not how that works. So I think understanding the way in which a specific community utilizes their language, how it's derived from, it's not a simple translation. People come to us all the time in my language department and give us like a list of words, or like, can you translate this? How much is it gonna cost? And we're like, well, we can do that, but it's actually a lot more in depth than that. So I think people understanding those the intricacies of Indigenous language is very, very unique. in that sense. And the other thing I would say is that, you know, because we've lost so much of our first language speakers in our community, like our languages at Six Nations are actually endangered. Even though we're one of the most populated First Nations in the country, we have endangered languages. I would say this to anyone in this room, like, we have to look at the inequity of funding languages in this country. There's so much that gets funded through the French language, but what Indigenous languages get in this country is so small, and like 85%, I think, are considered endangered in this country. So I think there's a more systematic issue than just translating street names or place names. And what a lot of the time my language department will say is that when we even look at a specific name, there's a lot of consultation that has to happen with some of our language speakers. I think at Six Nations, it is very hard in that way to translate, because we have 6 languages that represent our territory. 3 we call living languages, so Mohawk, Cayuga, and Onondaga are considered our living languages that we have people who speak, you know, and are fluent in our community. So to translate something, we're like, are you translating that in 6 different languages? Are you translating that in 3 different languages? Like, there's a lot to take in. And for us to go over place names, we bring together, even just for things that we do internally, we'll bring together our language speakers, our first language speakers, with our second language speakers, or those who are learning or have learned through immersion. And they'll discuss and break down words to try to find out what that actual place name was. They go through a very large consultation process. So I would say to anyone is like, don't come to us a week before trying to get your place name or street name translated. It's not gonna happen. There's a lot of work, and it's very, very intense work that has to happen. So one of the things I would say is that to understand all that, you need to really specifically understand the language with which Indigenous community you're working with. And for ours, even at Six Nations, we typically see in our community Mohawk and Cayuga sort of interspersed throughout the community in signage. And it's because we literally have 3 living languages in the community. So yeah, it's not as simple as I think people think. So that's what I've learned from my language department. Literally, there's times when we get asked for translations, and they literally have to bring together like 6 people to work on one word.
There's so many good points you said there. I was reading about Toronto, how it took 3 years to get 4 street names. And then also, just in the work we do at CCUNESCO, you know, we committed to translating in one language some of the documents we do, at least one language, and really started thinking about what that means when you're asking a community with very few speakers to translate a document that might not be relevant for their community. And so you really also want to really think about those things when you approach a community for translation, and maybe you can offer support instead of asking for translation for different things. And then also, I really appreciate your point about direct translation. Yeah. You know, there's you really lose a lot if you go to some, you know, transliteration. You really want to go. You lose a lot. So and sometimes it just doesn't exist. I was talking to a Cree elder who shared with me recently the word for culture, because he was saying consultants come and they talk to the elders and they talk about culture, and elders are saying, we don't, that's not a word in our language. And they came up, they shared a word, and I don't have it at the tip of my tongue right now, but what came closest to embodying the notion of culture was a concept that says the way we live, and also the way the land makes us live. And it's very different. Again, it just allows you to see this notion in a completely different way. So there's so much to be gained, and not literally translating as well. What are your thoughts, Larissa?
I mean, she got most of them. But, you know, just this question makes me think of, we've been getting the resource guide, the Indigenous Protocols in the Visual Art, which can be found at indigenousprotocols.art. We're getting it translated into Inuktitut, and there's still like a committee of Inuit elders and somebody who's involved with CARFAC. They're still trying to translate it. How do you translate appellation of origin? What does that even mean? Copyright, trademark, right? Intellectual property that's already built into not only our languages, but our culture. Hey, cousin, can I sing that song that you wrote? Hey, can I see your grandma's beadwork, right? It's just, it's already built within our languages, right? And, especially because many Indigenous nations, not all, but many Indigenous nations use, oral history, oral tradition. We're speaking. It's a living, right? Like a living language. So you have to understand, right, that not only are these very animate and inanimate, but like animate and vibrant languages, but that that took 4 years for 4 names or something like that, 2 years for something like that. It's pretty incredible. I don't really have much else to offer other than just, again, asking that ongoing dialogue, ensuring that you're turning that fear that I hear a lot of non-Indigenous people, carry, that fear of working with Indigenous people. I'm so scared of doing something wrong or offending someone, or what I like to refer to as being like auntied or uncled, where they put you in your place, so you do not, you do not move from, where we've settled you, and I guess something that I offer a lot in the workshops as well is, just finding ways to translate that fear into care. Translate that fear of working with folks into how can I, as somebody who is in reality in a position of support and in a position of power, really, how can I show this person care? How can I use that in the words that I'm using, in the questions that I'm asking, what I'm offering, the space I'm, offering them. And just asking. Something I think a lot of people forget when talking about Indigenous folks and, reconciliation. I think that we forget that we're just people. There are people on the other side of this conversation with, we very well may be a part of, certain nations and have different responsibilities and different rights, but we're still people who are living human experience and, have different personalities. So that's why it's just so important to just ask. Just ask and remember that we are people and that there is nothing to be scared of. And in fact, when we do auntie you or when we do uncle you, that actually means we care and we want to continue on this journey with you, this, building relationships. And, I think you should be fearful when you say you may mess up and nobody says anything. Because I think that's, I don't know exactly where I'm going with that, but I hope that makes sense.
Totally makes sense. I was in a circle recently, and one of the participants, she said, "We're not aliens, Just talk to us." Yeah, definitely. So, what do you think, Perry? Language experiences with incorporating Indigenous languages in your work?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that are important for cities. Cities are platforms. We regularly communicate with thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people a day. And so the way that we use that, I always reflect on like Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility. So we have an opportunity to reach people in a respectful way. So 2 things come to mind. The first is, how do you use that? And the second is, how do you ensure that that representation, again, embodies truth and respect and reconciliation? You're talking about the UN International Year of Indigenous Languages. When it was just a year, back in 2019, we adopted Oki as our official greeting, which kind of seems like a bit of a colonial act to adopt something that already had existed there for thousands of years. But I think when our Reconciliation Committee put that forward, it was really about, well, the city should recognize what was here before they were. And that one word with 3 letters has become this calling card of our community that I email with people from all over the city, whether or not they work for the city or not, and people open their emails with Oki. They pick up the phone and say Oki. We have billboards and stickers that say Oki. Every single City Lethbridge public works vehicle has Oki slapped on at the back of the car to kind of wear our values on our sleeves. So I think that's quite important, but it has to come from a place, and it has to be genuine in its intent, and it has to not just be done without proper consultation and dialogue. The other thing that I think about in terms of representation is you're thinking about like street names and park names and things, and all of our cities have legacies of white supremacy and colonialism embodied in the names that we give to places. And we did a project that I lovingly call our colonial audit last year, which that's not the name that we used to publicly communicate with it, because that would have scared all the old ladies and all the old guys in town. So we called it our public realm audit, and we looked at every single thing that the city had jurisdiction to name, which is about 2,000 things, and we were a relatively small city. And we hired the three nations of the Blackfoot Confederacy as our consultants to review those names through their perspectives, to engage with elders, to engage with knowledge keepers, to engage with youth, because even understanding within Indigenous communities, there's not a monolith of experience or perspective, and ensuring that Indigenous communities were the owners of those processes and the owners of the recommendations that came back to us. And we framed those in a number of ways. We framed it as kind of retroactive looking, like renaming, but also reframing. Sometimes things have been given names that were meant to respect Indigenous people's experiences that just don't do that, or they're done in a way that's no longer appropriate. So we needed to find ways of like, how do we maintain the aspects that could be respectful, but build upon them to actually be educational? And then placemaking opportunities. How do we...
My mother took Aboriginal law and advocacy in like 2000, I think. And so, you know, I've had books and been around the conversation since I was 4 years old, and I'm still learning. I only recently learned about the doctrine of discovery when I went to school, which was like 3 or 4 years ago now. I'm still learning, but that's the thing. It's just like life is a never-ending learning journey. We'll never stop learning. So, you know, don't get discouraged if you only know a little bit, or you know you don't know where to begin. Just start. Just know. And the things that you'll discover will definitely surprise you. And, you know, as I'm sure you've already been doing the work, hopefully, you know, it's very heartbreaking. It's very unfair. There's so much inequity. But that's my biggest thing. It's just know the facts. That's the only thing that I think, well, not the only thing, but that's super important in, you know, dismantling stereotypes. Because the thing about stereotypes is there's always that kernel of truth, but that's flipped and used against people to continue that oppression. Like, gonna get really uncomfortable right here, right now, but basic stereotype on Indigenous people, drunk Indian. Do Indigenous people in this country have issues with addictions and alcoholism? Yes. Have they been oppressed for well over 400 years? Yeah, we have. Do humans need a way to cope? Yeah. Was alcohol given to us as a tool? Absolutely. There is that kernel of truth, but it is used against us to further oppress us. It's understanding and looking at those stereotypes and those myths and saying, where does white supremacy come into this? How does this benefit the opposing side? And that's all I have to say, is just understand what has happened, and knowing the facts and not being scared to share them, not being scared to talk about it. It's so uncomfortable. I'm uncomfortable, and I'm sure you might be uncomfortable, but the only way through is just through the feelings and through just talking and just connecting as people.
Thank you, Larissa. Yeah. The truth part again, reminding us of the truth part. It's hard to move beyond truth to reconciliation without the truth part. Yeah, let's continue. Janice, what are some of your thoughts?
I mean, I'm just echoing what a lot of my other fellow panelists have said. It is education, and educating yourselves, and not to expect an Indigenous person to educate you. This is probably the biggest sort of takeaway I'll say, is it's not my duty. I do it in my job, don't get me wrong, I do that, and I'm happy to share anything that I can, but it's not my responsibility to do that. That is on other people's responsibility to learn and to understand and to listen. So I'll just leave that there.
Thank you. I'd like to open it up to the audience and see if we have time for maybe 2 or 3 questions. So I wonder if anyone from the audience has, yes. Looks like we have some runners with some microphones.
I'm curious about the last part of the title of this presentation and just around making mistakes. If anyone has anything to share around that.
Which one of you would like to comment? Or?
I make mistakes all the time.
Yeah. Me too.
Yeah, I think. So what's the question? Like how to recover from a mistake or how to avoid the mistakes? Humility helps in both, I think. Having partners, surrounding yourself with a circle of people who you can validate questions with or validate approaches with is always helpful. And seeking diverse opinions. It can be a tricky place to go into if you've never worked in it. And it's political sometimes, especially in territories where there are multiple nations and you're coming from a colonial organization and somebody's telling you who to work with and who not to work with. And so having people around you who can help you navigate that work is really, really helpful. I remember I hired a trainer from BC to come to our territory to talk to us about reconciliation. We also had a local speaker as well, but that's not the part that caused me to make the mistake. And so I learned from that experience and to emphasize the voices of within that local territory, and we never did that again. But we had to go through that mistake to actually understand the importance of local experience, and it was an important journey to have made, and I wouldn't have not wanted to make that mistake.
I don't think we can avoid mistakes in our lives and our work and anything we do. And my dad always says the only people who don't make mistakes are people who don't do anything. And we can't let fear of making mistakes, fear of the other, stop us from doing this work. Anyone else? Janice or Larissa, did you want to comment on mistakes? Or?
No, I mean, I make mistakes all the time in the work that I do. And I get lectured and scolded by people in my community, but I mean, that comes with the work that I do. And I can't fix anything if I didn't know I wasn't doing something wrong, right? So I think that's definitely one of those things that you can't be afraid of. Sometimes it's not the best feeling when you get scolded by a community member and you know that you're maybe didn't do the right thing. But that's the only way you learn, really. So can't be afraid of it.
Totally. And yeah, just to like build on that, I think the important thing to remember, when it comes to making mistakes is that if somebody, like I said, is going to auntie you or is going to uncle you, is to remember that it's not an attack on your person. Yeah. It is not a personal attack. You are in a role. You carry power. You have a job to do. And in that role, I think a lot of Indigenous people really value transparency for obvious reasons. So I think what's important is just that how you respond in those moments. It can be really hard. Believe me, I've been auntied at protests. I've been auntied in ceremony. I've gone through it. We've all gone through it. Where was I going to go with that? Oh yeah, it's how you respond and the action that I think that comes after that is the most important. Of course it's gonna hurt personally, but that's also just a part of community, of being connected to other people and being accountable to other people. It's gonna happen, and that's something I said in my workshops at the end. You will make a mistake, and it's okay. It's okay. That's how we learn. It's not the end of the world. They're not going to publicly slander you. And I think it's also important to remember that a lot of Indigenous people are healing. A lot of residential survivors are healing. And sometimes, depending on the people you meet, the reaction that you're going to get when you're getting auntied may be from one spectrum to another. It might be a little bit... might be a lot, it might be a little, but I think it's also just important to remember that we're healing, right? We're healing, and that may be evident in the way we respond as well. But just to remember to hold space for that.
Thank you. I love that you made auntie and uncle verbs. I think that's great. I think we have time for one last question.
Oh, well, I don't have a question so much as an observation that I'm kind of learning, and I wonder if anybody else feels the same, but in terms of commissioning artists, we want more Aboriginal artists. So we're working on an exciting project where we've commissioned an Aboriginal artist to do a large-scale artwork for our airport, our recently expanded airport. And it's just understanding that sometimes the timelines might not be the same as what we're used to in the past. We've always been a little hard-nosed, or maybe your boss or your manager or your counselor says, oh, where's that project? And it's just kind of having that discussion to say, look, it might be 6 months late, maybe 9 months late, but you know what, we're going to have a wonderful project in the end, and this artist is giving them an opportunity to expand their artwork, that sort of thing. So that's, I guess, working with our bosses or our counselors to say, look, maybe we need to adjust things a little bit and adjust our timelines. That's a big observation I've had.
Definitely. Indigenous communities and peoples are stretched and, carry a lot of different responsibilities and priorities. Some communities are still dealing with clean drinking water, and so sometimes your project might not be top of the priority list, and that means it's going to take more time. So I really appreciate your comment there. Thank you.
I do have something to add.
Yeah, please.
That's a part of protocols, right? The ways of doing, ways of being, ways of knowing. A lot of Indigenous nations don't have the same European concept of time, right? And I think, I love that it's just important to respect that and advocate on behalf of these people and being like, this is not something to be punished. This is just process. This is just how things are done. And I really recommend watching, I think it's called Totem on, I think it's either NFB or Netflix, where this community out in BC got their totem pole back after it being across overseas for, I think it was like 100 years, something like that. And I'm really not doing this story justice, which I apologize for, but they got it back. And after they agreed to preserve it, essentially, and their protocol is they rebury it, right? They bring it back out to the land. And that was not received well, but that's the thing. That's just protocol. That's just how we do it. And that's how you can respect Indigenous people, is understanding where we're coming from, and that because we are sovereign, even if other people and nations don't view us as that, we're going to make our own decisions, right? We know what's best. Still figuring that out, but we know it's best. But that's just that, right? It's just about understanding protocol and just how we function, right? Thank you for your comment.
So we're about to wrap up, so I'm going to ask each panelist to just leave the audience with one piece of advice you'd like people to walk away with. So I'll just start with Perry and we'll make our way down.
I guess I go back to the first question. Like, my takeaway is this work is relational, not transactional. I'll leave it at that.
So succinct.
Please don't be so succinct.
I could just go on and on if you want.
All right.
I'm kidding.
Yeah, I guess final words. We're at a really interesting time, I think, in history. And something that really impacted me, and that is not widely known, especially, within the grassroots community, is that Canada has adopted UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. I still saw on Orange Shirt Day and Indigenous Peoples Day that, there were grassroots activists still calling for this. And I think it's really important to remember that this did receive royal assent. UNDRIP received royal assent on Indigenous Peoples Day last year. The only province to implement it is BC. Everybody else is, in my opinion, fighting it. But UNDRIP is federal law. Articles 11 and 31 are most important, I think, here, especially when we're talking about public art. We do have, federally, we have control. We have rights. We have so many rights that are outlined in this. And, you know, I think that's really important to remember, because something like this could be monumental, or it couldn't, depending on how we act with it. But yeah, I think the work that we're all doing here is very important, and that obviously Indigenous people should be a priority. But just make sure just to not forget your heart in this work. And that's where I'll end that.
Yeah, it's not just head work, it's
Yeah.
heart work.
Yeah.
And hard work.
Yeah.
And thank you for bringing up the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. I think Canada has, you know, ratified it, but the laws are not in line with it. And it's going to take a long time before Canadian laws, I think, unfortunately. I would love to think that it won't, but it will, for the laws to be aligned with what the rights outline. And so I do encourage everyone to read them and apply them. Don't wait for Canadian law. You don't have to wait for Canadian law to catch up. You guys, actually, at the local level, you have, I think, more flexibility to be responsive and maybe be leaders on this. And so, yeah, I do encourage everyone to read the declaration and start implementing it. Yeah. Janice.
I think when speaking about this type of work, it's just really important to understand one, capacity within communities, and that to build the capacity, you know, it has to come from all sectors to assist in that, and understanding that the community will, in the end, will decide how and where and how they'll interweave in municipalities, for example. But I definitely think one of the biggest things that I always say to people is that relationship building. And one of the biggest questions I get asked probably daily is around this idea of reconciliation and what does that look like and what does that mean? And I always say to people, this policy in this country around residential schools, I don't even like the word schools, institutions, exist in this country for 150 years. It's going to take us 150 years to get out of it. And I think people want to see action before that, but that's like 7 generations. So we have to understand that it's very hard work, but it's also going to take time. And those relationships need to be mended and healed and continue to grow, but it will take time. And I think that's one of the things I say to people. It's not like you can't do stuff, but just acknowledge the fact that this was a system that was in place in our communities for 7 generations, and we're still very much impacted by it every day.
Chineshkumitin, thank you, panelists, and thank you all for being here.